April 12, 1940. Stockholm, Sweden. Before in fully up, a frantic message lands on the desk of the Swedish General Staff. It's worst-case scenario territory. In a single, terrifying morning, Denmark has fallen. German armored columns crossed the border at dawn, and before Copenhagen could even process the alarm, Nazi boots were on the ground. Simultaneously, Norway is being choked from the sea, the air, and the land. By the time the Swedish officers finish reading the reports, the phone lines to their military attaché in Oslo go completely dead. Just like that, Sweden wakes up in a stranglehold. To the south, Nazi forces are staring across a strip of water just 12 kilometers wide. To the west, German mountain troops are slicing through the Norwegian wilderness. Within weeks, Norway will belong to Hitler. To the east, Finland is locked in a brutal struggle with the Soviets. The Baltic Sea is no longer a trade route, it's a German lake. Sweden is entirely alone. And worse, they have absolutely nothing to fight back with. If the German army decided to cross the border, the Swedish military was staring down total annihilation. Their entire armored inventory consisted of just under 100 light tanks. Every single one of them was armed with a tiny 37mm Bofors gun. Now, in 1935, that gun was fine. But against the heavy, rolled steel rolling out of German factories in 1941, it was about as useful as a pea shooter. Top-secret minutes preserved in the Swedish war archives reveal a terrifying consensus among the high command. No Swedish tank could pierce modern German armor. No anti-tank weapon they possessed could stop a Panzer IV at realistic combat ranges. If Hitler invaded, Sweden's armor would last days. Not weeks, days. Sweden didn't just need a miracle. They needed a machine that could shift the entire geopolitical math of Northern Europe. And they needed it before the windows slammed shut. The blueprint they chose was an aggressive, fun machine, 75mm gun. It was designated the Stridsvagn M42, but building it was a logistical nightmare. You see, Sweden had strict legal limits. Their bridges and roads would collapse under anything heavier than 23 tons. Vehicle laws dictated a maximum hull width of just 2.35 meters. So, Swedish engineers had to build a heavyweight fighter inside a lightweight box. They slapped 55mm of welded steel on the front and a beefy 80mm shield on the gun mantlet. They packed the cramped turret with a 3-man crew and loaded it with 4 separate machine guns, including a bizarre one facing backward, because they expected to be ambushed in the dense Scandinavian forests from all sides. But then they hit a wall, the engine and the gearbox. The original German licensed transmission they tried to use was designed for city trams. It was a disaster, constantly tanked, stranded in the mud. Sweden needed a massive industrial titan to step in and build a real mechanical transmission. They went to Volvo. But Volvo wanted nothing to do with a risky wartime project. So the Swedish government gave them a brutal ultimatum. Either help us build this tank or we will seize your factories by military force and run them ourselves. Volvo chose survival. They opened up their Gothenburg plant, and alongside the main factory in Landskrona, they began secretly churning out the machine that would guard the nation. By the time production wrapped up, over 300 of these tanks were deployed. And right about now, you're probably wondering, how did they perform in battle? The answer is, they didn't. The Stridsvagn M42 never fired a single shot in anger. And that single sentence is exactly why one of the most successful tanks in human history. Sweden's strategy wasn't to invade Berlin. It was a deadly game of poker. They built 4 massive armored brigades and hid them in the dense, narrow approach roads, river crossings, and natural choke points of the Swedish countryside. The goal was to make the cost of a German invasion so bloody, so wildly expensive in men and steel, that Hitler's generals would look at the math and say, not worth it. The closest they ever came to the brink was when Germany demanded rights to move an entire infantry division through Sweden. While politicians debated, 15 fueled-up M42s were idling in the forest just outside Gothenburg, ready for war. Berlin knew they were there. The transit corridor was allowed, but the invasion was never launched. The M42 had won the war without ever pulling the trigger. On paper, the M42 was flawed. By 1944, its gun was already falling behind the German Panthers and Tigers, but an adequate tank in the forest was infinitely better than a perfect tank on a drawing board. And its story didn't end with World War II. In the late 1950s, Sweden recycled the hulls, slapped a brand new high-velocity Bofors gun on them, and created the Stridsvagn 74. It was so cost-effective they got 4 of them for the price of a single British Centurion, serving all the way into the mid-1980s. As for the original turrets, they didn't scrap them either. They yanked them off the hulls, embedded them into concrete fortresses along the Swedish coast, and used them to guard the Baltic approaches against Soviet threats all the way into the late 1990s. A tank born out of pure desperation, built under the threat of nationalization, ended up defending a neutral nation for over 50 years. It just goes to show that sometimes the best weapon isn't the one that destroys the enemy, it's the one that stops them from fighting in the first place. If you love deep dives into hidden wartime engineering and forgotten history, do us a massive favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next video, and drop a comment below where in the world you are watching from. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.